Hello, my friends. This is Latif Thomas of Complete Track and Field, and today I'm very excited to be talking to the University of Jacksonville Director of Cross Country and Track and Field, Ron Grigg. Today I'll be asking him about how the pandemic has affected the college recruiting process and what that means for high school coaches who want to best help their athletes maximize recruitability, as well as what parents and athletes can do to overcome missed training and performing opportunities over the past year, but also overcome some of the many mistakes and assumptions commonly made that, even in the best of times, hurt their chances at getting noticed and immediately turn off college coaches. So let's just jump in now.
As a director of track and field cross country, a college program, how has the pandemic affected your ability to evaluate prospects?
Well, first, I have a lot of empathy for the high school athletes and coaches all over the country who've been affected with, at face value, just the ability to have track meets, right? The ability to go and race and put up performances for coaches to evaluate. But behind that is also the restrictions on training and how that has likely set them back for when they eventually do get on the track and race again. They're just never going to be able to get that time back. Hopefully, they have the opportunity to get outside and be active. That, first and foremost, is the biggest piece, is that people just haven't had the opportunity to train or compete, and how that will impact their future performances is likely irreversible. But from a college standpoint, it is, especially at the Division I level, we are in an NCAA dead period, which means that we can have no in-person contact with student athletes on or off our campus. So we're not allowed to go out and watch competitions. All we can do is find the times on the internet. We can speak to them by phone. We can use social media. Even the prospects who are fortunate enough to be able to pay to come to see campus and walk around campus and take a tour as any general student and any general family would, we are still forbidden from interacting with them. In fact, we really can't even set it up. If we have any involvement, it becomes considered an unofficial visit, and the NCAA is incredibly strict on making sure that we are not pushing the envelope on that and then thereby encouraging people to travel when they might not want to or those kinds of things. So those have been the two main pieces, is that we can't see the performances and we can't interact with the student athlete.
With the performances that you can find, you got to go back farther in time. Even if you're looking at, say, this year times, like you said, they're not going to necessarily be what they could have been in an optimal world, especially when you consider how much kids change year to year going through puberty. What does that do to you in terms of how you're looking at kids who are now confused as to how they can still get recruited, because it just seems so unfair?
As college coaches, we have to dig deeper. We have to be able to do more watching of video. We have to do a lot more extrapolation. I mean, as you said, the data that we have is older. The greatest way to get better in track and field is to go from being 15 to being 16, right? Just moving through puberty is going to allow you to, most things being equal, allow you to just get better. And again, people haven't had the opportunity to put those marks down on paper. So we have to dig a little bit deeper. You can look at the track and field news top 10 list, pick any year, and go back and research and find out how many of those top 10 athletes went on to be college All-Americans. The easiest thing to do is just recruit the best mark, but at the highest levels, that is not necessarily the best predictor for future success. And secondly, the very best performances are probably going to a very handful, select group of universities. So everybody else has to dig a little bit deeper into this information. And so, we have to be able to talk with high school coaches, with parents, and with the student athletes themselves about things that they're doing in training. Do they have video? Do they have some testing results that we can look at? Because those are able to help us maybe put some context in that time period that was missed. If you've run a certain 100-meter time, but I know that you have a free lapse time 10-meter that I can see time and time again, that will allow me to have context and be able to figure out how much better you have gotten without ever having to see a track meet performance.
So when you talk about that type of digging deeper in that type of context, I've known you for years. As a high school coach, I feel on your email list, so to speak, every fall when you send your friends the results of the testing of those types of things. you do with your program. But when you look at that information and you look at trying to use that type of information, I don't think high school coaches understand maybe the difference. Well, the 100, I ran the 100. My time is 10:95. That's objective. It's fully automatic timing. My long jump is whatever, 22 feet. It was measured and marked and certified by an official. It seems more objective than basketball or other team sports. A lot of high school coaches, I think, and parents think, well, what else do you need as a college coach? What do the other things that you do tell you? And how, especially in a time like this, can that information separate the pack, so to speak, right? Because there's a lot of kids, say girls in high school, that run even 11.5. It's a big world out there. Now, if you're recruiting, and one thing I've learned as I've gotten older and my friends have gotten older and became head coaches and directors of college programs, is you guys do a lot of stuff that is not just coaching, a lot of administrative type of work to fill your day. So it would guess to me if athletes can give you more information than other similar athletes to them, that would be a value to you. So how do you look at it in your own program, and also what could that mean to you in terms of other sources of data, especially in a time like this?
I'll take the last piece first. If coaches are fortunate and we have multiple athletes of similar profile, how do we decide? If you're fortunate to be in a scholarship situation and you have a certain amount of scholarship dollars left and you have two girls that run the exact same time, how do you decide which one? Well, again, I want to be able to go deeper into their background and figure out which one I believe has the most potential. Again, going back to the old, we always see people who are awesome in college, and you go back and you say, they didn't do anything close to that in high school. So it's just some amazing college coach. It's probably not the truth. What I think is that track meet results are lagging indicators. You get a result after you have the ability to produce that result. And you mentioned the 100 meters or the long jump, and those are maybe the two shortest and quickest events with maybe the least amount of variables in them, really pure measurements. But to run a good 100 meters, you have to know how to accelerate, and there is both a strength and technical component to being able to accelerate well. You have to be able to know how to achieve maximum velocity in the proper way, late enough in the run to delay the decay in speed. There's a speed endurance quality that takes a significant amount of training. And so all of those things take a lot of time to develop. And so you may not be able to see a great 100-meter result, but you could have a very good flying 10 where you're coming from a standing start and a run-in over 30 meters, be able to produce a great 10-meter segment. And that 10-meter segment, while at the very moment is not translating into great track meet results, we know that the ability to get there exists. And so that's where you find these athletes who weren't putting up good performances at one point in time and eventually do. They always had the ability in there, and good coaches can see that expressed in their speed and power training throughout their program design. We talked about testing, but a lot of the things that we test are also great training tools. So we throw the shot put overhead back or a med ball overhead back, and we measure that as a test, but we also do it 2 or even 3 times a week for multiple repetitions with different hops and things in there as a way to express power, to develop motor unit recruitment, to improve neuromuscular coordination, sequencing of firing. All those things are great training tools that will help you to eventually be able to put those into your event. So the things that we test are also the things that we do in training. And so, you mentioned coaches maybe not having time to do specific testing units. Well, if you do maximum velocity work, then it's pretty easy to be able to just time a fly 10 in the midst of a practice and get a measurement and be able to keep those measurements. If you're doing standing long jumps regularly in training, and I think that you should be, then it doesn't take very much to measure some of those and keep track of them, whether that's a formal testing day or just keeping data for the coaches to understand and for the athletes to understand. For all of those reasons, one, it helps us dig deeper into similar recruits. 2, it's great training design. And 3, we can find qualities that exist that haven't shown up in competition yet. And it allows us to hopefully discover that diamond in the rough. The marks may not have them being recruited, but we know they're going to eventually be good, so we want to recruit them.
I kind of liken it to reading the code of the matrix. You can see a 100-meter time, and you said that's the shortest. I look at myself when I was an athlete in high school. I ran, 10.8, but no one would I'd even get put in, indoors in the 50 in dual meets because I was such a poor accelerator. So my guess would be if I was to have also in part of the recruiting, a block 30 time and a fly 10 time, you get to look at that and say, poor accelerator, but good fly 10. So maybe he's a 200 person, or maybe can move up if you saw 300 time testing. And what I've found from friends who look at different things that are college coaches, some people might look at that poor block 30 and say, I don't want anything to do with that. And another person might look at the same thing and say, oh man, put him in the weight room. Now we can run some crazy times. Do you evaluate the events differently if you have extra data to decide potential? Or how important is that? And is that why you do it in your programs, even when the kids are already in college?
Yes, I'm trying to evaluate the strengths and weaknesses of the student athlete, right? And they're often predictable. It is usually the flying 10 is probably their best performance relative to some of the other events because, even an overhead back shot put throw requires some experience and some coordination to do it. A standing triple jump requires some experience and some coordination to do it. They likely haven't done very much of it yet, but they're probably sprinted significantly, a significant amount, at least relative to those other testing events. So it's not uncommon to see a pretty good fly 10, but a relatively weak jump or throw in relationship to it. It's how I evaluate for how I will eventually design the training for that athlete. Right? We always want to maximize strengths while minimize weaknesses. So we're not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater and say, okay, well, they're already good at this. We're going to leave it alone. We're going to go work on all their weaknesses. No, we want to make sure that their strength is continued to be a strength, continue to develop, but we will spend enough time chipping away at the weaknesses. And to your point, again, if you happen to live at the top of the food chain in recruiting, then you can decide that you don't really want or have time for or whatever the rationale for projects. You want people that are a little bit more refined. But I can tell you there's very few schools that live in that world. And so to find the person who has a really good fly 10, but a poor block 30 and, a moderately good 100-meter time, well, that means that with proper strength development, proper acceleration technique and concepts, that we can see a significant improvement at 100 meters almost immediately once those parameters have to come up. And so I said that track meet results are lagging indicators. I think that testing results can be leading indicators. You will see what they're going to eventually be able to do. If they are a great accelerator, but don't have good top end speed, then we might be able to see them run really well we'll know that they're going to be running well at the beginning of the race. We're not sure what's going to happen after that, but we know how to then attack the training. Or if somebody puts up a really fast fly 10 on multiple occasions and we haven't seen it in a 100-meter result yet, we know that it's coming because it's already there. So that's a leading indicator that we see it in testing now. We're not seeing it in the track meet this week, but I know we are going to see it in the track meet rather soon because it's already there.
So if I'm a high school kid or I'm a high school coach designing training, especially if you live in a part of the country where even in the best of times, like up here where I live in the Northeast, you might only get one or two chances till you have a warm day to get a good fast time in that's going to look recruitable. When you're recruiting, how do you know if you can trust what they're telling you if they try to get recruited and send you their fly 10s and, block 30 times?
Yeah, well, we all know that every high school football player in a skill position in the state of Florida runs a 4.340. But that's what they're all told they run, and that's what they tell everybody they run. And of course, there's only 10 of those at the NFL Combine, but every high school kid thinks they do so. So yeah, it has to come from a reputable source, and so that's why track meets with FAT timing and wind gauges are so important. There are still smaller meets or areas of the country that are incredibly windy with no wind gauges, and we see these really fast times all the time, but we need context. And so same thing as with any of these testing results is if I personally know the coach and if we have spent time together and if perhaps I was the one that taught them or they've come and watched practice and have seen how we do it, then those are results that I can, without having to do much investigating, I can accept. Having them done in some kind of official combine fashion, or FAT timing, or at least free lap timing, perhaps with some video to back it up. Those are the things that we want to be able to see for example, in a standing long jump, the variation in a good standing long jump is not all that significant. So where you place your foot in relationship to where you measure is incredibly important. And so some coaches allow their athletes to put their big toe over the long jump pit they're going to jump into and kind of be able to push off of it. But do they put their toe 1 inch over, or do they have half their foot over? And so a 3 to 4 inch variance is a significant change in the result. So all of these things, having them standardized and measured by people who are experienced, is important for that information to be, accurate and then readily accepted by college coaches. But you can be sure that just about every speed, power, track and field coach in the country that has come through either the Track and Field Academy with USTFCCCA or USA Track and Field in the last 30 or 40 years knows about this kind of testing and is likely employed in their program, either very specifically as a test or those components as part of training. It's just the way that we have been raised. Right. These tests were developed, to the best of my knowledge, at LSU in the early 80s, and they have records going all the way back, and they have a scoring table, and to the best of my understanding, Bruce Sexnader kind of put that scoring table in a spreadsheet, and somebody asked me how we score it. The way I score it is I put the number into the spreadsheet and it gives me a number. I couldn't tell you what the formula is. I just know that's what it is. And like you've mentioned, for the better part of 25 years, the coaches that I've grown up with, we send our results all over to each other. So when Kemba was at Syracuse, I was getting his information. When I was at Wheaton, he was getting our information. When I was at Kansas State, he was getting my information. When he was, at Portland State, I was getting his information. Now he's at Harvard, I'm at Jacksonville. We're still sending each other our testing information, and we have records that go back years and years and years, and Todd Lane sends us LSU's, and we get it from everywhere. We send it off to, we send it to all of our friends. Send it to you, send it to Dave Cusano, I send it to Gabe, send it to everybody, and we just share it. Some of it's kind of bragging, like, hey, we got some that are performing really well and excited about this year. But more importantly, it's just more data points, right?
So that's it. That's so important. I think the best coaches keep good notes over time. And it's important, I think, for coaches and athletes and parents to know that it's not an abstract number that they get when they stay long or saying triple a certain distance. It's that when a college coach sees it, because I don't think I can think of a college friend that I have who doesn't do these things and measure these things. They see it. They have, hundreds, if not thousands, of results they've seen over time and can start to guess a range of what that means now and what that could mean later, potential-wise. And so, again, when you are a young person who maybe doesn't have enough meat under your belt, that, in some ways, I would say to some coaches that I've talked to, it almost means more to them than that 100 times, because you don't, or that 400 times, especially when there's a lot of variation in your meet performances.
Yeah, absolutely. It is 100% a language that most college speed and power coaches can speak fluently. The overhead shot put throw, we know that if you have a college woman, that obviously not, we're talking about speed power athletes, so 100-meter hurdlers, long jumpers, triple jumpers, heptathletes, 400-meter runners, doesn't matter what event is your event. If you can throw the 4K shot put overhead back over 15 meters, there's a really, really, really good chance that you are going to be an NCAA qualifier at some point in your career. And if you throw it over 16 meters, you're going to be an All-American. Now, that's a heck of a throw, but I mean, but it's again, this is a 100-meter hurdler taking a shot put, standing on the shot put toe board and throwing it overhead back. But if they can throw it that far, and we know how powerful they are, and we know that they are going to run under 13:10 for the hurdles. They just are. So that's a language that we speak. Now that I'm having this conversation with you, I'm surprised it hasn't filtered down to the high schools more, and not that it hasn't, but that information isn't shared more, both from the great training tool that it is, but also the information that it provides.
I'm surprised too. I'm surprised that hasn't happened as well. I think, though, I find sometimes at the high school level, people are a little bit less willing to share what's going on, in their day-to-day and the stuff that they're doing than at the collegiate level. That's a whole different conversation why I think that might be. But it's, I think, important for people to know, because it doesn't seem to be out sort of in the ethos here, that there's college coaches. So college coach, there's more to your times, especially in terms of your potential, your recruitability, than just your time or your distance or your height. And if you have more information, especially when, like you said, if you're top 10 or 15, 20, 25 ranked in the country, well, you're going to have a lot more, you're going to be a lot more in demand, and maybe, but most athletes, the vast majority of athletes, I think even with Miles Split and Athletic.net, just don't understand how many of them there are out there. And college coaches who have a lot of stuff to do really, in a lot of ways, want to get the best athletes for their program in it and be done with their recruiting as soon as possible so they can, move on to other things.
Yes, which is at practice, or in this day and age, it's really the next recruiting class, unfortunately.
Yes.
But and you make a good point, but really it's all relative, because even if you're a top 5 kid nationally, those same 5 schools are probably talking to all 5 of the top best kids in the country, and they're all relatively close to each other, and they probably can't have all of them. So which one are they going to be able to offer the most, or how do you differentiate? So it's relative. Just because you are incredibly good and have lots of attention, the people who are recruiting you at the very highest level, they are also scrutinizing the details as well. So it trickles its way all the way down. The events that are being tested are also great training tools. So there are so many reasons to become familiar with them. So you learn them so that you can do them then regularly in training, because they're going to make you better in all of your events. But then also the testing results have meaning to people who are recruiting you as well.
Yeah, I guess I'll wrap it up on that. It's not so much that that these are like one-off activities that you test for and then never to be seen or heard from again. Standing long jumps, standing triple, block work, fly runs, overhead back type of things, special endurance runs. These are just what you do in practice.
Well, there's a reason that these activities have been chosen to be tested. It's because of their direct correlation. They're one standard deviation removed from the event itself. So getting good information about those will tell us good information about the athlete and what they're going to be able to perform. But also, getting good at those things will make you a better athlete in your event. So they work hand in hand. I guess you go back to education, where the argument is, well, are you teaching to the test, or are you teaching for knowledge? Well, I think there's value to teaching for the test. If you get good enough at the information that's going to be on the test, then that makes you smarter globally. If exposure to these training tools, standing long jump, standing triple jump, overhead back, underhand forward, block 30, fly 10, and then any kind of speed endurance runs that you want, those things, learning how to do them well is going to serve you well as a speed power athlete moving along. And again, we said it's all relative. So as long as your marks are improving relative to yourself, then you are going to be getting better in your events as well.
Ron, I don't think I could have wrapped it up any better than that. And I just think it's good information for coaches and athletes to have, even completely aside from what they've lost due to the pandemic, but also at the same time, especially because of what they've lost during the pandemic.
Yeah, it's just good training, but I know that it would help me significantly if I had that information in the student athletes that I was evaluating.